This is ILTV on the hour. We're live in Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines from the region. Now, it's currently 2 p.m. here in Israel and 7 a.m. in New York City. I'm Caleb Ben David, and today is day 684 of the war in Gaza. Let's get into all the top headlines at this hour. The IDF averted a near disaster in Gaza today, repelling an attack on an army outpost in Khan Younis that seemed aimed at taking soldiers there hostage. The attack unfolded with a large group of terrorists emerging from a nearby underground tunnel and attacking the IDF position. 3 soldiers from the Kfir Brigade's 90th Battalion were wounded in the assault, one of them critically and 2 were lightly injured. But the troops held their ground, killing at least 14 of the terrorists. Now, this is one of the rare recent instances of a terror counterattack on IDF forces in Gaza, and the army is reviewing the incident. Meanwhile, the Israeli government is reportedly reviewing the latest proposal for a hostage release and ceasefire deal that emerged from the Cairo talks, despite Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly downplaying Hamas's acceptance of the latest agreement offered by Egyptian and Qatari mediators. Sources say Netanyahu will convene the Security Cabinet soon in order to review the agreement and formulate an official response. Since news broke of Hamas negotiators accepting the latest offers, Netanyahu's only public reaction has been to say that the terror group is under immense pressure in the face of the IDF's plan to take over all of Gaza. The Prime Minister reiterated the cabinet's conditions for ending the war: the disarmament of Hamas, the return of all living and dead hostages, the dismantling of the Hamas governing apparatus, and the establishment of Israeli security control in Gaza and an alternative civil administration that is neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. The Hamas announcement that it accepts the mediators' proposal for a 60-day truce and the return of 10 living hostages came only days after Netanyahu said that going forward, he will not accept any agreement that does not involve the return of all 50 hostages. Now, the White House continues to discuss this ceasefire proposal for a 60-day truce. A statement by Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt said it was no coincidence that Hamas bowed to the proposal after President Trump posted a strong statement saying Hamas needed to be defeated.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Hamas accepted this proposal after the President of the United States posted a very strong statement about this conflict on Truth Social yesterday. I would refer you back to that statement. As for this proposal that Hamas has now accepted, the United States continues to discuss it, and I'll let the President weigh in on it definitively. You're welcome. Sure.
Mediators in Qatar say that the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal agreed to by Hamas is almost identical to an earlier plan put forward by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. The proposal includes the release of 200 Palestinian security prisoners jailed in Israel, along with an unspecified number of imprisoned women and minors. That's in return for the 10 living and 18 deceased hostages. The mediators also insisted that the 60-day truce includes a pathway to a comprehensive agreement to end the war. Qatar's foreign ministry spokesman, meanwhile, in the coming days, moving on. The IDF will call up some 60,000 reservists ahead of the Gaza City operation, in addition to the 20,000 that have already been called up. This after Defense Minister Israel Katz has approved the detailed operational plans for the offensive that were presented by Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir. The reservists will be given about 2 weeks to train for the new operation. Now, under the reported plan, regular forces will surround Gaza City along with several dividing axes, this following the evacuation of about 1 million Palestinian civilians to the southern part of Gaza. The objective remains the full evacuation of northern Gaza as the military prepares for this offensive, and troops in Gaza do continue to carry out daily operations against Hamas. Now, the IDF and Shin Bet have announced the killing of terrorists responsible for kidnapping Yarden Bibas from Kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th. The IDF says Jihad Najir was targeted in an airstrike on August 10th, and his death has now been confirmed. Yarden Bibas responded to the announcement, saying that for him, the news provided partial closure, and he was grateful that Najir will no longer be able to harm anyone. Now, back in April, the IDF killed Mohammed Awad, who kidnapped the other members of his family. Yarden was freed in a prison exchange with Hamas on February 1st, and of course his wife Shiri and young sons Ariel and Kafir were all murdered by the terrorists, with coffins containing their remains returned to Israel later that February. Elsewhere, reports coming, Syria's official Sana news agency has confirmed that the country's foreign minister, Assad Hassan el-Shabani, met Tuesday in Paris with Israeli officials. According to Syria, the talks were held under U.S. mediation in the presence of the White House's special Syrian envoy, Tom Barrack, and focused on, quote, enhancing security and stability in Syria and preserving the unity and integrity of its territory. According to Israeli media reports, Regional Affairs Minister Ron Dermer took part in the meeting. Dermer and El-Shabani have reportedly held prior talks in Paris and Azerbaijan, as Israel seeks guarantees that the new Syrian regime will not allow terrorist groups to establish a presence near the Golan border area, and will also provide security for the Druze community in southern Syria, which has come under attack by jihadists supported by government forces. Well, joining us now for more on all of these topics is Jonathan Schanzer from the Washington-based Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and or Yissachar, the Director of Research for the Israeli Defense and Security Forum, who's also today apparently in Washington. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Or I want to just start with you, this news of the government, Benjamin Netanyahu, and perhaps later the Security Cabinet, reviewing this new proposal, this 60-day ceasefire proposal coming out of Cairo. How do you think they will react, and how do you think they should react?
Well, good morning, Caleb. I believe this is a significant step on the way to secure the release of the hostages, although mixed reports would suggest that, with Hamas, an Iranian-backed militia group, a terrorist group that originally started this war, it's very hard to tell until it's done. And we saw in the coming days to the January deal just how much pressure had to be made in order for Hamas to agree to these terms. Ultimately, the original sin of this war would be an Israeli lack of preparedness to such a scenario for an all-out war with Gaza, and the perhaps the hubris on the part of Iran that can challenge Israel into not be able to complete all of its terms. Eventually, go back to the original objective of this war, which is cleansing Gaza out of a viable terrorist threat to Israel. And ever since the beginning of the war, I remember back in November 2023, Israeli troops have already been around Gaza City. And so I hope this time they will finish the job and Israel will pave the path toward making sure that Gaza will never again pose a threat on Israel.
I want to go to Jonathan. Also, you could weigh in on how you think Israel should respond. And also would like to hear from you on how you think the White House may be responding, because, of course, this proposal supposedly based on the earlier Witkoff proposal for certainly initially a 60-day ceasefire. But there have been some comments out of President Trump lately which suggest that maybe the White House has moved closer to the Israeli position, that there has to be a comprehensive deal that includes, of course, the destruction of Hamas, at least its military capability.
Yeah, Caleb, look, I would say a couple of things. Number one, that this appears to be more of the same. Hamas offering another partial deal, not meeting the conditions set by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who called the other day for nothing short of a full release of all 50 hostages, not over a period of time, but all at once. I think that remains, a core goal of Israel. And I would say that accepting anything less than that would probably look like a compromise on the part of the prime minister and on the part of Israel. But I think we need to understand something. Bibi has yet to make a decision, right? He has now ordered the call up of 60,000 reservists. He's preparing for a full-on assault on Gaza City, at the same time weighing his options as it relates to this possible deal. In other words, Netanyahu stands at a crossroads right now. I don't think he's made a final decision yet. I think he's left both options wide open. It'll be very interesting to see which direction he goes. And I think the direction that he takes will likely be informed, at least in part, by whatever kind of support that he gets from the president of the United States. Donald Trump has made it clear that he would back Bibi if he wants to take this action in Gaza City. Although I think it needs to be understood right now that this operation, according to reports that we've seen this morning, would last into next year, into 2026. This would be a massive operation, one that would take its toll on Israel in some shape or form, whether it's just the call up of all these people, of course, losses potentially on the battlefield. These are all things that Netanyahu has to weigh right now. Not easy decisions for a man who's been leading this war effort now for almost 2 years.
Or maybe pick up on some of Jonathan's points there, because we know that in the security cabinet, there are some ministers who believe no, any such deal has to be rejected now. The IDF has to continue onward, including this offensive and taking over the Gaza Strip, while there are others in the cabinet who say it's worthwhile pursuing a proposal. Even some in the security establishment who say even if it is just 60 days, the army could use this time to basically take a needed break and maybe regroup if it does have to pick up on the fighting. So let's look at some of the factors for and against both approaches.
Well, I would make the argument that the IDF should have prepared for the all-out occupation of Gaza City from the beginning of the war. And indeed, we saw right in winter of 23 how IDF has already taken control over large swaths of Gaza. But I would say a couple of things. First of all, this can be a deal, but not an act of surrender, as in Hamas cannot be expected to release a handful of hostages. Really the ludicrous previous proposals in exchange for 50 or 60 days of truce and a complete withdrawal from Gaza City or the Gaza Strip rather. Israel cannot be expected to accept those terms. But number two, I would say that ultimately Israel is tested here by the entire region, and President Trump sees it. The focus right now is on Ukraine, but remember that 2 months ago, we were in a hot war with Iran, taking on nuclear reactors. This is the regional power that originally funded Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis, and of course developed nuclear weapons. And so I think the president views it as a much larger issue than Gaza City or Khan Younis. He sees the new Middle East architecture forming in front of our eyes. I think missing this historic opportunity would be a mistake. Israel sees it not only as an opportunity to secure a deal with Hamas, but ultimately the next step would be the annihilation of Hamas as a relevant fighting force and the controlling power in Gaza. This ultimately is the goal, to take control over the Gaza Strip as a spring step on the path to reframing the conversation in the Middle East.
Right. And Jonathan, certainly, as Or says, President Trump seems to have gone aboard on this idea that Hamas must be destroyed. He made that quite clear in his last statement on this matter. But the one issue that is still a sensitive one for the U.S. and even for President Trump is this humanitarian aid issue. We know this Gaza plan would involve moving hundreds of thousands, some even say 1 million civilians southward, would have to be a much bigger effort to provide humanitarian aid. How far would the Trump administration go along with this operation, given, I think, what we can expect, the sort of onslaught and this sort of information war or defamation war against Israel in this regard?
No, I think the cognitive warfare that will be waged against American citizens, Israelis, and I think in capitals all around the West will be a difficult one for Israel to surmount. And I think we need to understand that going in, that when this operation begins, it will be a full-on assault on everyone involved in this. And I think the GHF is going to come under significant pressure. This Gaza Humanitarian Foundation will come under immense pressure. I think the onus will be on Israel to explain exactly where the aid is getting in, how food is being distributed. What I think was lost in the narrative over the last month or month and a half has been the fact that there are different pockets of food security and insecurity throughout the Gaza Strip. A lot of that actually depends on where there is active fighting, where Hamas is in control, where some of these other criminal gangs are in control, and where the IDF, where the GHF, and other responsible actors may be operating. That was not made clear last time around. The Israelis, I think, did a terrible job of explaining it. Of course, they were being maligned the entire time, so we understand exactly what was going on. But I think the onus right now, if this operation moves forward, will be for Israel to explain exactly where food is getting in and where it's not. That would be the lesson learned from this last couple of months.
Yeah, again, or maybe respond from the Israeli perspective there, because there's certainly disagreement over how effective the GHF and its operation has been. But I don't think any disagreement that the fact that Israel had kind of lost the narrative war in, as Jonathan suggests, in making clear of the efforts it and the United States have taken in trying to provide the proper supplies to the civilian population in Gaza.
Oh, I could not agree more. Look, there's no question that there is a whole lot of disinformation surrounding the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that is meant to replace Hamas and the UN to provide humanitarian aid for Gazans. But I would also make the argument that Israel did not fill in the void with a proper advocacy, or at least supply the right information to tackle these claims. I remember there were days, a few weeks back, where not a day goes by without Israel being accused of killing a few dozen Palestinians in aid distribution sites. And all these reports received, were received with applause and with standing ovation around mainstream media. And Israel did not do enough sufficient efforts to tackle those claims. And so I would suggest that we be much more clear, even providing the visual reassurance.
All right, do we have the audio? I'm not sure. We may have lost Or's audio. Okay. Maybe I'll go back to Jonathan Schanzer. Jonathan, I just want to ask you to get to. Yes, now I hear you, Or. Yes, sorry. Finish your point. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, the point is that eventually Israel will have to fill in the void that is currently being filled by anti-Israel forces. And again, as I said a few weeks back, I remember not a day goes by without Israel being accused of targeting Palestinians in aid distribution sites, which of course was completely falsified. But Hamas takes advantage of this appetite for anti-Israel reports that oftentimes sell newspapers better than we think in order to win over Israel in the information war. And right now, the main effort alongside the battlefield effort is the war of information. And Israel has to do a much better job in tackling those claims, including inviting international reporters, including being much more efficient on international fora. But ultimately, it's the United States and President Trump who support Israel in this effort. And this is an incredibly major asset that Israel has to know how to channel in order to secure. And ultimately, the objective here is clear: to pull out the population out of the urban areas of Gaza, to pull out this leverage of Hamas, of control over civilian population, and provide humanitarian aid in distinct, separate sites in order to fully take control over the Gaza Strip and cleanse it from terrorist infrastructure.
Gentlemen, I'm going to put you on the spot, 30 seconds each, just based on what we know now, what we've learned. How optimistic or pessimistic do you think they're going to be a hostage deal, or we're going to see this offensive into Gaza City move forward? Jonathan.
Look, I see this still as a toss-up for the prime minister. I think he likes having both options available. I think he's trying to see whether he can exert that diplomatic pressure by threatening the use of military force. If he doesn't get what he wants in that deal, then I think he goes forward. I think with the operation in Gaza City, if he gets what he wants, then he gives the IDF a pause, but he will maintain the flexibility of going back into Gaza City at any point that he wishes, even after a deal is concluded. This is, I think, ultimately what Netanyahu wants. He wants this thing wrapped up. He wants all the hostages home, and he wants the ability to destroy Hamas. And I think the road to destroying Hamas likely goes through Gaza City. That seems to be the understanding right now within IDF brass.
Briefly, deal or no deal here?
I'm cautiously optimistic, but they say that pessimistic is an optimistic person with experience. But I would say that I would hope that a deal is secured because the hostages are being tortured and starved in the tunnels of Gaza. But ultimately, it would be a function, deal or no deal, would be a function of to what point it serves the grand strategic objective of this war, which is rebalancing the balance of power in the Middle East, countering Iran and its forces, and strengthening American sphere of influence in the region.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. And of course, let's just hope, as always, the best for the hostages, one way or the other, however this turns out. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the diplomatic tit-for-tat between Israel and Australia continues. The spat started when Australia's Home Affairs Secretary Tony Burke canceled the visa of Israeli Knesset member Simcha Rothman, who had been invited for speaking engagements to the local Jewish community. Burke said that Rothman, a member of Bezalel Smotrich's religious Zionism party, would not be allowed into Australia to, quote, spread a message of hate and division. This is after Australia sanctioned Smotrich back in June, accusing him of encouraging violence against Palestinians. And in response to this and the Australian government's recent decision to recognize a Palestinian state, Prime Minister Netanyahu called the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese a weak politician who betrayed Israel and abandoned his country's Jews. Well, here's how Albanese and Burke reacted to that statement.
We'll continue to put forward Australia's position. And, you know, Australians want those two things. They want the cycle of violence to stop, and they don't want conflict brought here. And that is very clear, and that's been the response from leaders of the community.
But on the issue of that you go to, particularly there, about strength versus weakness, strength is not measured by how many people you can blow up or how many children you can leave hungry. Strength is much better measured by exactly what Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has done, which is when there's a decision that we know Israel won't like, he goes straight to Benjamin Netanyahu. He has the conversation. He says exactly what we're intending to do.
Well, I think we can expect an Israeli response to those comments. Now, Israel has also revoked the visas of Australia's diplomatic representatives to the Palestinian Authority and said it will review all future visa requests for any Australian officials. Well, let's now have some good news. There was a celebration this morning at Ben Gurion Airport hailing the arrival of the first Nefesh B'Nefesh Aliyah flight since the start of the Gaza war on October 7th, 2023. 225 North American immigrants were on that El Al flight from New York. The new immigrants included 45 families with 125 children. Now, the youngest newcomer was 9 months old, and the oldest 72. More than 1,000 North American immigrants are set to arrive in Israel this month. That's the highest monthly total since Nefesh B'Nefesh's founding back in 2002. Officials say the immigrants from the United States, France, Great Britain, Canada, and other Western countries are on the rise, with an 80% spike in increase for Aliyah since the start of the Gaza war. Well, our Devo Klein was at Ben Gurion Airport this morning to welcome the flight, and she brought us these voices and scenes from there.
By everything that's going on in the world, we just felt like it's our duty and our responsibility to be here and to support our Jewish nation and to be part of it. This is our home, and, you know, it really just over time started to feel more and more right. And we can't believe we're here.
9 months ago, I did not know I was going to be living here. Right now, I'm here. I'm officially an Israeli citizen, finally. And I am just overwhelmed with joy. And you guys could do the same exact thing, too.
And you're not worried about the war or anything going on?
We're going into the war. We're going in to serve.
Going to serve in the idea.
Worried, yeah.
I've worked with Nefesh B'Nefesh on so many different issues. And every single time, they can handle the logistics all you want. But for making people feel welcome and comfortable to make the next step and to be able to feel like you're welcome, each individual took their time and effort to take and extend that to us.
I just want to say bruchim habaim and welcome, and have a aliyah matzliach, a successful aliyah for those new immigrants joining us here in Israel. I'm just going to come back to today's top story. The IDF averting a near disaster in southern Gaza today, repelling an attack that was on an army outpost in Khan Younis that seemed aimed at taking soldiers there hostage. That attack unfolded with a large group of terrorists emerging from an underground tunnel and attacking an IDF position there. 3 soldiers from the Kfir Brigade's 90th Battalion were wounded in the assault, 1 seriously and 2 lightly. But the troops held their ground, killing at least 14 of the terrorists. Now, this is one of the rare recent instances of a terror counterattack on IDF forces in Gaza. The army is reviewing the incident. Meanwhile, as I said, Israel is reportedly reviewing the latest proposal for a hostage release and ceasefire deal that emerged from the Cairo talks, despite Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly downplaying Hamas's acceptance of the latest agreement offered by Egyptian and Qatari mediators. Sources say Netanyahu will convene the Security Cabinet soon to formulate an official response. Now, since the news broke of Hamas negotiators accepting the latest offer, Netanyahu's only public reaction has been to say that the terror group is under immense pressure in the face of the IDF's plans to take over all of the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister reiterated the cabinet's conditions for ending the war: the disarmament of Hamas, the return of all living and dead hostages, the dismantling of the Hamas governing apparatus, and the establishment of Israeli security control in the Gaza Strip, and an alternative civil administration that is neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. Now, the Hamas announcement that it accepts the mediators' proposal for a 60-day truce and the return of 10 living hostages came only days after Netanyahu said that going forward he will not accept a new agreement that does not involve the return of all 50 hostages. Now, the White House does continue to discuss the ceasefire for the proposal. Mediators in Qatar say the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal agreed to by Hamas is almost identical to an earlier plan that was put forward by the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. The proposal includes the release of 200 Palestinian security prisoners, along with an unspecified number of jailed women and minors in return for 10 living and 18 deceased hostages. The mediators also insisted that the 60-day truce includes a pathway to a comprehensive agreement to end the war. Meanwhile, in the coming days, the IDF will call up some 60,000 reservists ahead of the Gaza City operation, in addition to the 20,000 already called up. This is after the Defense Minister Israel Katz has approved the detailed operational plans for the offense presented by Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir. The reservists will be given about 2 weeks to train for the new operation. Under the reported plan, regular forces will surround Gaza City along several dividing axes following the evacuation of about 1 million civilians to the southern part of Gaza. The objective remains the full evacuation of northern Gaza as the military prepares for that major offensive. Troops in Gaza continue to carry out daily operations against Hamas. The IDF in Shin Bet announcing the killing of the terrorists responsible for the kidnapping of Yoden Bibas from Kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th. The IDF says Jihad Najir was targeted in an airstrike on August 10th, and his death has now been confirmed. Yoden Bibas responding to the announcement, saying that for him the news provided partial closure. He was grateful that Najir will no longer be able to harm anyone. Of course, back in April, the IDF killed Mohammed Awad, who kidnapped the other members of his family. Yoden was freed in a prisoner exchange with Hamas on February 1st. His wife Shiri and young sons Ariel and Kfir were all murdered by the terrorists, with coffins containing the remains returned to Israel later that February. Well, that wraps up this edition of ILTV News on the Hour. Please stay tuned with us for more to come. Thank you for joining us. I'm Caleb Ben David, and stay tuned to ILTV. Thanks for joining us.